You're listening to The Rule of Law, the educational podcast sponsored by All Rise, where we focus on the intersection of law, technology, and storytelling. And now, here's your host, Lauren Round.
Welcome to Rule of Law. In today's episode, we sit down with Sean Jardine, author of Ditch the Billable Hour and managing director of Big Yellow Penguin. In today's episode, we discuss the basics of value-based pricing for law firms, how to shift your mindset when it comes to billing clients, the concept of client deselection, and more. Sean, welcome to the podcast. Where are you recording from?
I'm recording from the edge of the Cotswolds in the United Kingdom, if any of your listeners have ever been there.
I was going to say you might have to give us a little bit of a geographic reference point for our U.S. listeners.
Oh, okay. Not far from Oxford, or if you're a fan of Jeremy Clarkson's program on Amazon Prime called Jeremy Clarkson's Farm, not far from there. Or if you've ever been to a shopping emporium on the outskirts of London, Bicester Village, I'm not far from there. So that might actually give, not far from Stratford upon Avon and William Shakespeare. So that neck of the woods.
Okay, very, very helpful. You know, it's funny. I just got back from the UK earlier this month. A colleague of mine here at All Rise is going on a trip to the UK next month. So your tourism office is doing something correctly. We've got people from the US visiting all over the place.
Oh, well, you and all your dollars are very welcome in the UK. We have an economy to provide for.
Yes, absolutely. All right, so let's get into it. Normally, we start the show with an icebreaker, and then we do a question on background, but you are actually one of the rare guests where we can combine those two questions in one. So start by telling us the origin story behind the name of your company, Big Yellow Penguin.
Right, okay. Something I get asked quite a lot about because it's an unusual name for a law firm, consulting firm. I'm a great fan in the book from the Harvard Business School, Professor John Kotter. And he wrote a fable, John Kotter's the change management guru. He wrote a fable called Our Iceberg is Melting. And it's a little story about a group of penguins that if they don't change what they're doing, if they didn't change and move to a new iceberg, the iceberg was going to explode and all the baby penguins were going to die. Their colony would drown. So it's a great change management book. It's perfect for lawyers because even one of the characters in the book carries a briefcase, so we can actually identify with the penguins. You can read it in an hour and a quarter. And yellow penguins do exist. They're very rare, but they do exist. And I'm 6'4", so it kind of like was all linked together. So I am a big yellow penguin. The penguin, of course, is a metaphor for change. Although I know your listeners can't see it, I do have a large penguin on my desk behind me, and that's my colleague Declan, as I call him. So there you go, metaphor for change.
Perfect. Yeah, and everyone listening, go to Sean's LinkedIn. You can actually see Declan all over the world, recently skiing in the Alps, sightseeing in Poland. So Declan is a world traveler.
He has the life I could only dream of.
Yes, exactly. All right, so let's dive in. We have you on to talk about value-based pricing because I think this is something that a lot of lawyers maybe are curious about, afraid of, don't even want to talk about. It kind of runs the gamut, and there's a lot to cover, but I have to start with the basics for folks. What exactly is value-based pricing?
Right. Value-based pricing is nothing more than getting a price that is fair for the value that is created. So we lawyers live our lives in 6-minute units. And if I could save you £1 million or $1 million, and I can do that in 6 minutes, is the correct price 1/10 of my hourly rate? Or is it actually something more akin to the value I've created, the $1 million? And when I talk about this, when I work with groups, I always say, look, everybody's heard the old story, the old joke of the factory that ground to a halt and none of the machinery worked. And they decided they had to get the old engineer from the village up to the factory because he worked in the factory many years ago. And so they went and got the old engineer, and the old engineer spent a bit of time listening to the machines. And then eventually he took out of his toolbox, he took out a little hammer and he tapped the machine and the machine started running. And he sent in a bill for $1,000 to the managing director. And the managing director said, get me a breakdown of this bill. And the old engineer sent a breakdown of the bill, which was cost of hammer, £2. Knowing where to tap, £998. Now you're nodding because you've heard that story in one way, shape or form. And everybody thinks it's a fable. It's true. The guy was Charles Steinmetz. He was born in Poland. He moved to America and he was hanging around with Nikola Tesla, Einstein and Edison. And he was a brilliant electrical engineer. And he was called in to the factory that had ground to a halt. He spent 2 days there in 1923 listening to the machines. And he sent in a bill for $10,000 in 1923. Henry Ford said, give me a breakdown of that bill. It was his factory. Ford's had ground to a halt. And Steinmetz went, cost of chalk, because he put chalk on the machines, cost of chalk $1. Knowing where to put the chalk marks, 9,000. So it's a true story. It's linked with America. And so you guys invented value-based pricing. So all I'm doing is copying what you're doing.
I love it. You know how to speak to Americans. We want to relate everything back to us, take credit for everything. That's perfect. So I think, when we talk about value-based pricing, I think it's often talked about as just kind of an alternative pricing model, just another option. But I want to spend a moment on teeing up why it's more than that. And I want to quote something that you said in one of your newsletters, which is, value-based pricing isn't just another management fad, it's the lifeline of your firm. So let's start there and just tell us what you mean by that.
Okay, look, if you embrace value-based pricing and you move away from the billable hour, guess what? Clients like it. And if you don't believe me, lawyers listening to this podcast, ask your clients if they would like you to give them 3 fixed prices for doing legal work, rather than an open-ended check that is the billable hour. They will say yes. So clients like choice. We know in our own lives, we like choice. We like to choose what watches we wear, what clothes we wear, what cars we drive, what wine we drink. Everyone likes choice. So it's good for clients. Lawyers, we want to work with people who value what we do. And we know that in the profession, work-life balance is an issue, burnout is a problem. And so if we're working with clients who value what we do, we don't need every bit of work that comes through the front door. We need more than our fair share of the good stuff. So we can enjoy our craft. We can enjoy going to work. And sadly, some lawyers don't, because if you've got to live your life in 6-minute units, or one firm in Australia, 1-minute units for time recording, that's not a good business model. And then finally, if you, as law firm owners, usually law firm owners will set budgets by thinking, how many hours can I get this lawyer to bill in a year? And they might have a range of 900 hours to 2,400 hours, depending on how many hours they think their lawyers can do. Multiply that by an hourly rate, and then that gives you a lawyer's target. Well, if you do value-based pricing, you can remove the artificial limit on that earning potential of the lawyer. So, for example, one law firm I work with, we created choice of 3 prices for a client. It was employment contracts for a commercial client. And we said to the client, we can give you some precedents to fill in. We'll check your homework, £2,000. We will do it for you in 3 weeks' time. £5,000. We will do it for you tomorrow, £8,000. The client chose the £8,000 option. Was the client happy? Yeah, I didn't even know I could get it tomorrow. Wow, what a great lawyer you are. Was the individual lawyer happy? Yeah, I'm going to do half my monthly target tomorrow. Were the equity partners owners happy? I really hope so, because we can earn more from our lawyers, but we haven't got to make them do more hours, because clients will value what we do and are prepared to pay for it. So it's a mindset change. And that's why in the book, and I follow Kotter's methodology from Our Iceberg is Melting, there are 8 steps to implementing change in a change management program. And so that's what we've got to get our heads around, that if we're wedded to the billable hour at the moment, let's break free, implement the 8P-point plan, and then just actually change our business model.
Yeah, and it's interesting you described kind of the ceiling on the billable hour model where we're setting the target here. And I hope this is changing a little bit, but at least in the past, that ceiling was really hard to get to, right? It was very difficult for associates to bill that many hours. So exceeding that, to hit additional bonus targets or something like that was nearly impossible. And that's why you see the surveys about lawyer burnout and those things. So I think the idea of taking off that cap and being able to actually exceed those revenue levels without having to give up your entire life for the billable hour sounds great.
Absolutely. And without having to lie and pad your timesheet as well. I read a lawyer's biography the other week, and she had mentioned that when she was training to be a lawyer, the partners would come in on a Monday morning, talk about how at the weekend they had played golf at their golf club with a client, and the client asked them about work as they walked around, so they charged them for the time playing golf. That's not ethical, but if you're faced with the problem of I've got to hit this amount of chargeable hours, it's just not a great way to live. So I think it's a great business model. I know it works, and I encourage people to investigate how it works.
Okay. So on that note, that's a perfect segue. It seems like for a firm, for a solo practitioner who has not gone through this process before to shift to value-based pricing, it seems like you have to arrive somehow at this magic number. It's not too high. It can't be that much higher than your competitors or so high that your client won't pay it, but it can't be too low where it's not worth taking on the work. You have to kind of arrive at this Goldilocks number that's just right, or at least that's the perception. So, the big question is, I'm a solo practitioner, I'm a managing partner. How do we decide on a price? And I realize that's an impossible question because you wrote a whole book on this, but give us the basics. How, for someone listening who's interested in this, how are they supposed to decide on a price?
Okay, well, first of all, we've got to know, and this comes back to, I'm afraid, an element of time, which is, what is our base cost for doing something? Have we got a base cost? We might say, yeah, we know that to do this bit of work, effectively to cover our overheads and to take a bit of a salary, it's going to cost $1,000. That is our base cost. That's not the price we're necessarily going to offer the client, but we know it's a price we cannot go below. So we need to actually look at our business and think, what are the products or services we sell, and what does it cost us to do that? So have that figure. We then, when it comes to offering to do the work for the client, we need to ask ourselves some questions. And these questions might be, for example, how busy are we at the moment? Do we need this bit of work? And if the answer is, well, we're absolutely rammed, we don't want to do it at a base cost price, we might think, well, we would do it if we can get 5 times the amount. 6 times. How busy are we? Does this case add, if we put a lot of investment and time into doing this work, is it a one-off case, or can we replicate it going forward in the future? Because it might be worth doing it in that respect. Are we going to enjoy, let's go back to our craft. Are we going to enjoy working for this particular person? Because if we're not, we might want to put the price up higher again. And these are the things. The thing is with value-based pricing, there's no formula. We will never know how much value we leave on the table. Charles Steinmetz and Henry Ford, okay? Would Ford have paid $20,000? We don't know. History doesn't tell us. But he might have. But Charles Steinmetz might have thought for 2 days' work in 1923, $10,000 was a good enough amount. So we don't know. But all I can tell you is we will never get that pump fist price, the price that makes us think, yeah, unless we ask for it. And sometimes we have to ask for it, and be prepared for a client that might perhaps say no. Now that leads us to, well, what do? We don't want clients to say no. Well, we can give clients gold, silver, bronze options. Now this totally freaks some lawyers where they think, no, every client deserves a gold service. And I'm afraid that's nonsense, because that's like saying every time we go on a long haul flight, we should all be allowed to turn left and drink the champagne and the smoked salmon blinis. We don't. What we're paying for on the flight is a competent service to get us off the ground at London Heathrow and deliver us to Cape Town in South Africa. That's where I last got on and off a plane. The service I want is get me up in the air and get me down on the ground. Wherever I sit on that plane depends on what the service I get, depends on how much I've paid for my seat, in which class. So we can offer clients gold, silver, bronze service standards. And guess what? Sometimes if a client wants it, take my example of the £8,000 employment contracts. If clients want something urgently, they will be prepared to pay more. And this morning, actually, I'm working with a small firm in Sydney, Australia. And the partner there decided to give this pricing a go. And she got double the price by offering to do it quickly for her client. She thought, oh, the client won't go for it, so I'll double the price, see what happens. The client said yes. So then she said, I then had the problem of running around telling all my staff, we've got to do this really quickly, which I don't think they'd quite at that time planned for. But anyway, they can plan for it going forward.
Yeah, and I noticed you talked about that in your book, about how when you first start working with a firm, they say, like you mentioned, well, we can't possibly offer different levels of service. It's one service, it's one price. And then it just takes about 30 minutes of thinking a little creatively. And all of a sudden you're able to come up with different prices and it works out. But I think a lot of times lawyers are more linear thinkers. And so thinking creatively doesn't necessarily sort of come naturally.
Absolutely. And in the book, I talk about possibility thinking, where it is, what could we possibly offer as a gold service to our clients? So if, for example, I'm a great Tom Hanks fan. If Tom Hanks rang us up and said, would you do my legal work? What would we possibly offer Tom Hanks as a service for his private client work? We would say, Tom, we're going to come to you. Of course we want to go to him. We want to be nosy and have a look at his house. We will come to you, Tom. Tom, would you like to get your accountant there, your financial advisors there? We want to meet these people and put together a whole structure for you. So, Tom, if you've got underage children that might need guardians, if you know, in the event of your untimely death, do we need to speak to your guardians? And we would deliver a uniquely bespoke service to someone like that. Well, it doesn't have to be Tom Hanks, because there will be clients in your neighborhood who will pay for that uniquely bespoke service. All we've got to do is A, create one, B, tell them that we offer it, and C, price it differently from our bronze service, because there will always be people who will want a gold service and pay a bronze price. But we can't make a living doing that. We can use tech to deliver our bronze service. That might be a client portal. It might be an app. It might be, I will give you email updates. For our gold service clients, our Tom Hankses, Tom, you pay me enough money, I'll come around and shout through your letterbox about what the update is on your case. That's how we can do it. And those are you can get very creative about what you can offer, but you need to get people in a room and do possibility thinking as a group.
So I want to talk a little bit about actually making this shift, because it's fun to think about. We have lots of success stories out there about firms who have done this. You have personally helped a lot of firms make this shift. But I think for a lot of folks who are currently on the billable hour model, the thought of making this shift is just too heavy of a lift. Like, a lot of lawyers can barely keep their head above water on a good day. And they're not, they're not wrong about that. You're upfront in your book and in your writing about shifting to value-based pricing requires a paradigm shift. So talk a little bit about that and maybe why it is actually worth the time and the effort required to make the change.
Okay, it is a change management project. It's not simply an email where somebody decides, oh, tomorrow I'll do it. You've got to actually think, well, strategically, the paradigm shift is, yeah, I'm going to move away and I'm going to give this a go. You then have to get the management team on board, and that, depending on the size of your organization, you might be the management team. It might just be you, or you might have other people, but you've got to get your management on board. And then you have to create the second P in the plan, 8P point plan, is pioneers. Let's select a group of pioneer penguins who are going to want to get involved in this and try it. And those aren't necessarily, they might not be other partners. It might be that you use other people, associate lawyers or somebody like that want to get involved. So that's important. And then you have to prepare a plan. We have to promote it within our organization. And then crucially, we have to permit people to give it a go. And actually, they might get it wrong. They might price work and a client says, no, I'm not interested. And the important thing is that it cannot be career limiting for any lawyer to get involved in this process. But then it needs to go back to the management leading this and being prepared to back their people and give it a go. Because once you give lawyers that confidence to try, they will. And, we're back to you'll never get the pump fist price unless you ask for it. But you could try and increase your prices by 10%, 20%, or something like that. And then when you find you're not getting pushback, you might find, okay, next one, I'm going to double my price and see what happens. And guess what? Not everybody buys on price.
And on that note about empowering people, and you alluded to selecting the pioneers may not actually be the most senior people in the law firm. I've heard a couple of different times questions about how do we handle, if we want to shift to value-based pricing, training with associates and new lawyers, because they have years of experience onboarding new associates, teaching them how to track their time. They have that down. So how can firms sort of expect a new associate to know how to price the services, define wins, etc.? I mean, what has your experience been with this young new cohort of attorneys?
Okay, well, quite often, and when I work with law firms, or if I speak at conferences around the world, I will do surveys, electronic surveys, before I speak. One of the questions on the survey is, when a new starter joins your team, how is the pricing induction undertaken? The most common answer that is given to that question is, there isn't one. There's no training. There's no policy. We just give you an hourly rate and tell you to get on with it. That in most cases is what happens. So associates or senior lawyers tend to do what they've always done, which is learn by a process of osmosis. And what I encourage people to do is create a policy, write it down. So when new lawyers join the team, we can say, this is how we price around here. And the good thing is that if you can have a clearly defined process and policy, and that's what my book is aiming to do, create a big book of usefulness where we write this stuff down, then your lawyers will join your firm, and guess what? They will follow it, because we're good at that stuff. We will follow rules. We will actually follow procedures and policies. It's if we left to our own devices, we will just do what we can then. And I'm working with one firm at the moment where the CEO attends the meeting. He says you can try this. It's not career limiting. I want you all to give it a go. And the most junior lawyer in the firm gave it a go and had a tremendous result. And that you could see all the heads looking around the firm of this pioneer penguin group, looking at this lawyer thinking, wow, if she can do it, then why can't everybody else? Because all she did was, well, my boss told me I can do it, so I'll give it a go. And she asked for £2,000 more on a matter than their base cost was. And she got it.
Incredible. And I think that leads into issues around or selling points on retention, right? Because it is hard to recruit new attorneys and keep them. That's the biggest. Young attorneys, rightfully so, are sometimes looking around and seeing where a better opportunity might be. So if they're at a firm that empowers them to take on this role and they're not having to bill in 6-minute or, God forbid, 1-minute increments, I think that could actually be a retention tool that we're not talking about.
Absolutely, because you're working as a team, so you're not necessarily hogging all of the hours, thinking I have to do all these hours to hit my target. Because if you're working as a team, you will delegate work to the right level to do. You've all got the same aim in mind, that we want to try and increase the profitability for the firm, and that way we can actually hit our targets easier. We can, if you doubled your price and lost 40% of your clients, you will make more money and you will have so much more time to spend with your clients delivering the service that you want to do. And when you ask any lawyer, why did you go into the law? Usually it's because we want to help people in some way, shape or form. And what's not to like about being able to spend more time doing that? Because we haven't got this little spectre on our shoulder talking about the hourly rate and non-chargeable time. I used to hate the phrase non-chargeable time in my firm. I used to get my troops to call it investment time. We're investing in that relationship. That's what we need to do.
Deploying new software technology can disrupt familiar workflows and processes, and it often comes with a steep learning curve for the employees in your law firm. We get it, but it doesn't have to be that way. Allrise is a comprehensive law practice management system deeply integrated with the Microsoft tools and technology you're already familiar with, so no steep learning curve is required. And because Allrise is a modular software platform, you can deploy only the specific capabilities you need when you need them. Your choice. If you want to streamline internal operations, boost staff productivity, and deliver superior client service, then take a close look at the AI-powered Allrise platform. It's time to experience software innovation that enables practice excellence. Learn more at allrise.ai.
So you mentioned this idea of maybe actually downsizing the number of clients that you have, which brings me to the concept that you talk about in the book of client deselection. So whether that's not taking on a new client or dropping a current client. And I mean, to be honest, just that statement on its face feels a little wrong to even say out loud in a world where it's never been easier to start a practice. Competition has never been more fierce. It's only accelerating because of AI. So I totally understand, the inclination to want to take just about any client that walks through the door. So talk a little bit about why client deselection actually needs to be a priority and why it's important in the value-based pricing context.
Okay, well, bad clients drive out good clients for a start. If we've got a big portfolio of bad clients, they're going to make our lawyers' lives hell. And that means we've got a work environment. We're going to have a churn within our own law firm. And ultimately, leaders of law firms have got to accept we're in the people business. Our lawyers are human capital, and our human capital leaves our business at the end of every day, goes home. And next day, we want them to come back into the office and carry on working for us. And when I first talked about deselecting clients as a pilot project, a lawyer said, are you absolutely sure that you mean this? I said, absolutely. And this one lawyer said to me, well, I've got a client that makes my life a misery and I feel terribly sick when the phone goes. And I said, we don't have to do that. And I knew the client that this lawyer was talking about, and I knew that the client was difficult. And I said, well, she said, I've got 2 bits of work on the go for her at the moment that I need to finish, but she's talking about giving me another 5 bits of work, and I don't want to do them. And I said, we don't have to do them. I said, go and get the file. We'll ring the client now. I rang the client, and we'll pretend the client is called Lauren. It wasn't called Lauren, but I rang the client. I said, Lauren, hello, it's Sean. She said, hello, Sean, because she knew me. She said, how are you? I said, yeah, I'm very good, Lauren, but I'm afraid this is going to be a difficult conversation because I'm going to not ask you to send us new work. She said, well, I've got 5 new cases I'm going to send you. I said, yeah, that's it, Lauren. We don't want them. And it went very quiet. And she said, you've been listening to that silly little girl, haven't you? I.e. my lawyer. And I said, oh, sorry, Lauren, didn't I mention that my colleague is sitting here with me? And I said, this is the problem. You've made my point for me, Lauren. You do not value what we do. And ultimately, I've got to look after my people, and you're not the kind of client we want. And so we'll finish your last 2 bits of work, but we don't want the other 5. Thank you very much. Now, that lawyer left that meeting elated. She was very happy. The next morning, do you know what happened? I've got another lawyer at my office door saying, hello, Sean, can we talk about this client? And in any law firm, one of the training exercises I do is to say, in a group of pioneer penguins, write down the name of a firm, a client you want to sack. And I guarantee that a name will crop up from more than one person. In fact, I did it last week with a large firm I'm working with. 20 pioneer penguins in the group, and 8 of them had the same name on their list of we should sack this person. And the client CEO was there, and he just said, yeah, fine, don't act for him. And they were elated because human capital, let's look after our people. You know, it's just not worth it. So that's what we've got to do.
And it is, I've sat in not anything as comprehensive as what you do with the firms, but I've sat in on some, client ranking meetings at the end of a year. And it is always amazing to me the sort of mental gymnastics that lawyers can go through to justify keeping a problematic client. It's like, well, they paid on time last month, even though they didn't pay on time for 6 months before. Oh, well, we'll just keep them the next 6 months and then we'll reevaluate. Or there's this huge list of excuses of why we're going to keep this client.
And that comes back to lawyer confidence, because we're frightened. We think that if we let that client go, there's not another one round the corner. Well, there are people who will instruct us, because we should not assume we know what people are prepared to pay. Because if we spend some time finding out about our clients and really getting to know our clients, then we can get to know them and charge them more. And in the book, I talk about lawyers love to say we're the trusted advisor. We're not. We're not, because we haven't earned the right to be trusted, and we don't know enough about our clients. And I passionately believe that. And we also talk about, it makes me laugh on lawyers' websites. We put the client at the center of everything we do, except when it comes to charging them for the services, in which case we will charge them in 1-minute units, whatever it is. It's just madness.
Absolutely. I want to talk a little bit about the mechanics for firms that already have a long established roster of clients making this switch, because if you're going to offer value-based pricing to a brand new client, that seems a little bit more malleable. That seems a little bit more straightforward. But the idea of transferring an existing client to value-based pricing seems a bit intimidating, especially if you've been working with someone for a long time. So can firms exist in a sort of dual billing model where they're keeping established clients on a billed hourly system and the new clients are offered value-based pricing? Or is that just a bad idea and you kind of have to do one or the other?
It can be done. It can be done. That it is very rare for a client, if you give them the choice, that they will choose the billable hour. And on some of the templates that I've created over my career, I have given gold, silver, bronze, and billable hour as an option. And I've only ever had it selected once as billable hour. And that turned out because the person that was retaining us didn't have authority to go above the fixed price that we were offering, but they did have authority to retain us for a billable hour job. But so yes, you could, with any pilot project, start small. You've got to prove the concept because you want your other lawyers, the no penguins who might be thinking, I'm not sure about this, to become convinced. So we have to have prizes to success. You know, one of the P's in the 8P point plan is prizes, where we celebrate success. But ask clients. We can ask on the next. If we're halfway through a job and it's billable hour, we're probably going to finish it on billable hour. But the next time the client comes in, we might say, well, actually, we can give you a fixed price, and we might be able to give you 3 versions of a fixed price, depending on the service levels. And mostly clients will say, wow, I didn't know you could do that. And then half of them will be thinking, why didn't you offer me that years ago then? But anyway, that we are where we are. But that immediately gives us, we're looking for unique selling points in our law firms. What differentiates us from the competition? Well, it could be, we will never deliver you a bill that you've not previously agreed. Wow, that sounds powerful. How do you do that, Sean? Well, I will sit down with you. I will agree a scope of work. I will agree a price. And if I agree a price with you for £5,000 for doing something, and then I deliver you a bill for £5,000, we're not going to fall out over fees. What tends to happen with lawyers is we think it's going to be £5,000. We don't scope it properly. We rack up a bill of £15,000, and then we tell the client we'd like an extra £10,000. And lo and behold, the client gets a bit upset about that. And why wouldn't you? You know, and so we've got to have better relationships with clients, have conversations, find out what makes clients tick, because all clients are not the same, and neither is the work. Everybody's different.
I think I'm hearing a theme here of the need to pivot away from operating from a place of fear, because it seems like a lot of this boils down to we're scared we're going to lose a client. We're scared the client's going to say no. We're scared a new client's going to say no to the fee. And it's all connected, right? Because that's connected to having bad clients and you're afraid of them. So it sounds like I'm hearing a little bit of a fear theme here.
Yeah. And sometimes it can be the culture of the law firm itself causes fear. So sometimes I did one big partners away day for a law firm, and the managing partner said, Sean, we're a bit worried about our XYZ team because their lawyers there in that team, they only do 3 hours a day, chargeable time. I said, oh, okay. I said, are those teams led by partners who, if the associates or junior lawyers come along and say, we've done more work than we thought, we need to write that time off, are those lawyers going to get a telling off from that partner? And the managing partner said, yeah, come to think of it, they will. I said, that's what's going on. I said, if you're going to get told off, you may as well just get told off once a year when they do the appraisal to say, oh, Lauren, you're only doing 3 hours a day. Can you try and improve that next year? And you'll say yes. So you get one ticking off per year, rather than every time you go up, create a bill to say, I need to write off £500 or £1,000, in which case you're going to you might get 10 telling offs a week. You know, hang on, with self-preservation here, I'm just going to go for the one, please. And that comes back to culture, where we need to say, look, this is what we need to do. The pricing in that team is clearly wrong. And it might be that the pricing is top down, pushing it low, where it might be the partner's policy. And I've worked with law firms who've said, well, our policy is to undercut everybody on price. And I said, well, this is madness. It's a race to the bottom. And this, I still remember the jaw of this partner saying, "What, you think that's a bad thing?" And I'm saying, yes, I think it's a very bad thing. Your people will burn out. You will have loads and loads of work, but you won't make any profit. And one of the things that lawyers do need to understand is the profitability of law firms.
Yeah, and plus, I mean, from the client perspective, not that they would put this on their marketing, but the last thing you'd want to hear from a firm is our model is a race to the bottom and just to undercut everyone else. That's not what you want from someone that's going to be representing you.
And who's going to want to go and work for that law firm where they say, yeah, they might be having 50 cases where they are at the moment. Come and work for me in this team, and you've got 250 cases. It's crazy.
Well, I want to end on a high note. You've kind of scattered some stories throughout, but you work with firms all over the world, helping them shift to value-based pricing. Are there any really standout success stories that come to mind that you can leave us with?
I think, well, my latest standout success story is this very young lawyer, the most junior lawyer in the firm. And honestly, if anyone wants to take anything away, take away that thought of the most junior member in the firm being empowered to ask for more money and being prepared to do that. I love working with lawyers. I love it when they have successes. I love it that they, when I was running a law firm, it used to be I regarded it as a disciplinary offence for a member of my staff not to attend their child's sports day or nativity play. You have to be at these events. I sat through all my kids and I wanted to go and I was in a position to go. And I think everybody should be at all of those events. We should be allowed to have time off, whether it's, if we've got an elderly parent or a young child, or just we need to have some time off. We should be able to do that. And if we can create firms that are a joy to work in and that we want to go to work at. And that ought to be our real aim. And you come across firms where they've got that and they do it right. And, if I could have my time again in my legal career, I'd be wanting to build that from day one. I'd be wanting to do that in my 20s.
Yeah, absolutely. Very, very well said. Well, Sean, thank you so much for being here. What is the best way for people to follow you and learn more about your work?
Oh, thank you. Well, you can follow me on LinkedIn or alternatively, bigyellowpenguin.co.uk. There's only one big yellow penguin on a URL, I think, or something like that. But yeah, get in touch. And if anybody wants to chat, if anyone would like to play with an AI generated pricing penguin that I've created, I'm more than happy to make tools available to help people on their pricing journey. Okay,
great. Thanks again. All right, I'm going to keep recording because I have to record a couple ins and outs. But that was great. Were there any points that you feel like were left out that we didn't get to cover?
That was great. There was some really good questions there. So no, I liked it. Very, well done. It was great fun.
Okay, good. Well, I wish you all the success. I wish that someone, when I was interviewing at law firms, I wish someone like you was working at the law firm and helping them make a better culture and, make it more attractive for young lawyers. This was like years ago. I'm not a young lawyer anymore, but I want to tell myself things are getting better. So I hope that's the case.
Well, I had an email today from a guy called Steve Manton, and he's in Miami, and he's at the Legal Pricing Institute, and this is a pricing group, and I've been admitted to this as one of their 5 academics. I wrote a book, got a penguin. That seems to be the criteria. And he has said to me today, Sean, we've just finished the conference in Miami, and we've got lots of older people who get pricing. He said, we've decided we'd like to do a virtual conference for younger lawyers. Would you be up for that? And I've just gone back and said, absolutely, because again, it's just making people think, wow, there is an alternative. And we didn't get into AI, and quite rightly so. But if AI is going to make us do things that took us 20 hours that can now do it in 10 minutes, what's the pricing model? It can't be we just charge 10 minutes and then go and find another 20-hour job, because we'll burn ourselves out even more.
For sure. I was just on a different webinar, and one of the questions from the audience was, is there any hint that use of AI is going to be mandated in any way? And the answer was, I don't think so as a rule matter, but as a practical matter, it seems difficult that in 10 years, a lot of firms would survive without using AI at all. So yeah, that could have been a whole nother podcast, but.
The chief judge in the UK, the master of the rolls, is a guy called Sir Geoffrey Voss, VOSS, and he is into AI in a big way. And last March, so a year ago, it was last March, I met him in Manchester. He had a paper that came out saying, so this is the most senior judge in the UK, said he can foresee a time where not using AI will be regarded as negligent.
Wow. That's so unusual, I feel, for having very senior members of the bar, senior judges, to be kind of like the leaders in tech, or maybe that's just the US. I'm not sure, but that seems unusual to me.
I will find the article and send you a link to it.
Thank you all for listening. We'll catch you on the next episode.
And join us again for another Rule of Law podcast from All Rise.